Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Deeper Podcast with Sophie Josephina. And today I am joined by Allan McGrath Isbell, and he's a men's coach and a mentor of Polarity. And he's a good friend of mine, and I have had the delight of getting to know him through our studies with our teacher, John Wineland, and some really beautiful conversations in our last retreat. And I'm so excited to have him on the podcast here today. So, Allan, hi, welcome.
Hey, Sophie. Thanks for having me.
So good to have you here. So for people who might not yet know who you are, Allan, do you want to just give a really brief introduction? I know these always suck, but a brief introduction
Right.
about who you are and maybe what you're building or what you're doing in this world.
Totally. Yeah. So like you said, I'm a men's coach. I've been working in the men's work field for about 7 years now, and have spent the majority of my time working with just men. It was like men's work was a big initiation for me to get into that in my early 20s. And really, I just dedicated myself to it ever since my first sort of men's initiation workshop way back when, and haven't stopped and have made it now it's kind of evolved to become my purpose and my career. And I have more recently expanded into working with men and women and in the field of polarity, and really helping people to deepen in this thing called relationship, which so many of us are in and frustrated by and love. Um, and yeah, so it's been something that I've kind of just organically stepped into and through my commitment to my personal growth.
Yeah.
And that's what I like to teach from. It's just my personal experience. And um, yeah, that's a fair snapshot without covering the whole story.
I love that. I love that. I've had the delight of experiencing you leading some things through this training that you and I are both following, and you're such a wonderfully like stable, calm, super grounded, super centered person to just relax around. So yeah, I can so see you doing this men's work and also now going into the polarity stuff. So I told you before, and I was going to ask you this question, so I'm actually really excited to ask you this. So I've I've loved asking men this. What's been your journey with the feminine in your life in whatever way you want to share that, but what's kind of been the path that you've gone through in your lifetime?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you told me you were going to ask this, and my first question was like, "What do you mean by the feminine?" So maybe we'll just define that, right? Like,
Yeah.
the feminine is it could be represented by women. It could be represented by um, it's like our emotions or
Yeah.
our feelings. Like everything is the feminine. And so, to put it shortly, my relationship with the feminine has deepened as I've deepened, right? So my
Yeah.
relationship to myself and my own feminine um,
Mm.
has deepened as I deepen. I come from a family of really strong women and not so strong men.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
Historically, my grandfather was um, kind of the typical like uh, provider father, but absent often. And my father kind of took the role to be more present and to provide, but there's always a kind of emotional absence to it. And so that was juxtaposed by really strong women who had like fierce beliefs and fierce emotions and um, fierce feelings. And um, so I learned like to both trust the feminine because I had trustworthy women in my life, but also to distrust my own inner feminine because I had
Mm.
a father who didn't often um, kind of show me what it was like to express
Mm.
healthy emotional like to equate feminine with emotion,
Yeah.
to express my feminine in a healthy way, to hold it in a healthy way. So a lot of my life I suppressed my inner feminine and relied on external feminine sources to to kind of balance myself. um, And that didn't go well. That didn't go
Surprising.
well often. And so a big part of my journey, particularly with men's work, was learning to relate to my own feminine expression in a way that was supported and held by other men.
Yeah.
So in fact, I think my relationship with the feminine deepened most by being with other men. And
Yeah.
yeah, we'll start with that.
Yeah, I
It's a
love
big
that, because
question, but
I think this is such a large topic in the field kind of anyways right now, of male vulnerability and men expressing their emotions. What I've noticed myself, and I will out myself, and I've heard it a lot, of course, also from the people that I work with, is that the moment a man expresses his emotions, we lose attraction. But not always. And I'm trying to
totally.
define what the difference is. So I'm super curious what your perspective is, because it's not always the case. And I can't really put into words what it is.
Yeah, it's something that I'm always kind of picking up pieces on in my own relationship and the people I work with. And I think it's something like when a man expresses his emotion, if we just keep it really basic, like he's more in his feminine in that moment, right? Yeah. He's having a feminine moment.
Yeah.
And so in like, if I'm in my feminine, there's not so much space for the person who's in relationship with me to be in theirs. And so that feeling of attraction, we could also call it a feeling of polarity, right? There's a charge, right? There's a charge in our attraction. And so it's not going to be as attractive. It's not going to create so much polarity if I'm, expressing vulnerably, but that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? It doesn't mean that like we can't do it, right? I think there's this kind of stigma in the polarity world that like everything has to create polarity all the time, and it really doesn't. Like you don't want to be charged in every moment. It's like it's perfectly okay for a man to be in his feminine, and for his more feminine partner to be in her masculine, and to hold him in that. And I think, to make it even more nuanced, there's a way that a masculine being, a man, can express his feminine in a way where he's still holding himself. Like,
yes, this is it.
He's taken the time to digest it and hold it. So it's not just this like feminine vomiting. Like he's just, he's lost all sort of awareness of his being or his heart, and he's just pouring it out in an almost unconscious way. I think there's a line, right, between just unconscious expression and like artful opening of your heart to create connection.
Yeah, I feel that I sometimes try to explain this to my partner is sometimes I feel like he's emoting from his little boy.
Right.
And I've had to do the work not to judge that, because I used to judge that. I used to think, oh, there he is with this little boy. Oh, I don't want to do this. Right. So I will out myself there. Definitely had some judgment on that, and that I'm more compassionate now. And there's a way that he can emote that feels, and I saw you write about this a few times, about this like kind of inner leadership.
Right.
Where he is emoting, he is showing me his vulnerability, but I can feel that he's got himself.
Right. Yeah.
And that he isn't drowning in what's happening. And so I still actually don't feel then that I have to step into a more masculine role. I feel like I get to just kind of witness him navigate himself almost, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And that's really beautiful to watch. I've noticed that feels really opening to watch. But what I will say with all of this, I think there's a part on women's side or the feminine side to be able to see a man go into his vulnerability and not right away think, oh, I have to hold him, or oh, that's unattractive. And to be more compassionate, because I think we can be a little bit critical about this sometimes.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And men, I mean, I hear that so often from men that they feel like they can't share what's real because they've experienced their partners, kind of criticize them for it or get
Yeah.
disgusted by it, or
Yeah.
and so it's kind of, it's never all on one partner.
No.
There's always a dance happening between both. Like each of us has to take responsibility for our sovereignty, our emotions, our well-being, our spirituality, like our depth. We have to take care of all of that individually so that we can hold each other well, and we don't just go into unconscious reaction to our partner's little child that is emoting, for example, and instead can like love them through that, right?
Yeah. I think often in how we speak about polarity, it's very much, or I think some people kind of take it in as it's a very easy tool to say the other person should be doing better. They should be
Totally.
more present.
Yeah,
He should be
for
more grounded.
sure.
And to often forget that we have this beautiful responsibility to actually create the energy ourselves. If my man isn't centered, maybe I just actually get to drop deeper into my body.
Right.
Right. And I think a little bit related to that, what I've been curious to ask you is, lost my train of thought 1 second. I have so many good questions here, and I thought, oh, that's also a good one. Yes, I am curious how you navigate as a man, because I think this is a really complicated issue. How you navigate her critique, her complaint, because I think one of the main things that we kind of just accept as is that when, and I'm talking very heteronormative here, but when a woman criticizes a man or says, hey, I didn't feel you, or I felt dropped by you, or whatever, that the first thing is very much like feeling critiqued, closing off, not like, if it's really uncomfortable to process. And I have a lot of compassion for that, because I can feel that the core of the masculine is so wanting to be respected and wanting to be appreciated. So I understand why that would feel so threatening. But I'm curious, as you maybe in your own journey or what you've learned or what you teach men, how can a masculine man maybe a bit further on in his journey be with when there actually is critique? Yeah.
So they're like, it's real. It's not, because sometimes there's tests, right? Just like, she wants to feel if you can remain totally loving and present and deeper than her momentary critique, right? So there's that.
Yes.
And just to name that a little bit, like that requires a stability in self, right? That requires almost again, it's kind of like to be deeper than she is, to be it's like confidence goes towards it, but it's not quite it. It's like a deep trust in your being that like no matter what, you're okay. Like your being is good no matter what. And that's, it sounds kind of simple, but a lot of men live their life with the belief that like deep down they're not okay. Like that's kind of the essence of the nice guy. It's like somewhere deep down he's not good. And so he's constantly, his life revolves around proving that he's good. He's a good guy.
Right? Never seen it like that. Yeah, you're right.
So and so when his partner critiques him, that's just another example of his badness, like the way he did it wrong, right? So he'll go into defense, he'll go into trying to prove, like, show his laundry list of being in integrity, right? All the things he did right, basically to prove her wrong, but deep down he feels that she's right, and she's, he doesn't want to be bad, so he's got to prove that he's not.
Right.
So we fall into all kinds of spirals and dynamics in that.
Yeah.
Now, that's that doesn't touch on if she's right.
Yeah. What if she's right? What if he wasn't completely present at dinner? What if it was that?
Yeah. So there's something I think people in our field of work they know David Data, so I'm just gonna
Of course, yeah.
assume people know
Everybody
who
will
he
know
is.
David Data. Yeah.
Okay, great. So David said something like really beautiful one time, which is essentially that in a third stage relationship, you are agreeing to trust your partner's heart more than your own.
Ooh.
And so in that moment, it requires real, like real warrior type energy to go like, okay, where is she right? Like where, like to go right in, because the response is usually defensiveness, right? Because we're
Mm-hmm.
tender, like underneath the armor, there's a tenderness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we don't want to admit it, but it's true.
Yeah.
So to go like, okay, if I'm in this relationship in the way I want it, and I'm committed to living like that, I'm committed to letting, like, I'm choosing this person to trust their heart more than my own, you know, to a healthy level. There are kind of aspects where this can get unhealthy for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, I guarantee there's a part where they're right. So to have the humility to go and inquire within, to say, like, you know, essentially take responsibility for the fact that she's right in some place, because my sense is she usually is, even if she's not right entirely, and even if you can't see it, she probably still felt something that is true, right? The feminine is so sensitive to the energy, the masculine is not. So if a man is more in his masculine, he's not going to be sensitive to the fact that he wasn't present at dinner. So it might take him a moment to become sensitive to it, to find where she's right, and then take ownership for it and go, yeah, baby, you got me, right? I wasn't there, and I'm here now, right? To like not to not defend or attack or try and fix, but to take responsibility, and then like use it as a playful ally, like use it as an ally to reconnect, right? Because it's not that because you weren't present in that moment, now everything is wrong and you're bad, and like like shame spiral needs to happen. It's like she wants you to feel that you weren't present in that moment, such that like it wakes you up to be present now, right? To be here now. And that you might be experiencing this ongoingly. So that's a whole nother topic. But like this is an ongoing critique, and there's all kinds of subtleties and dynamics that happen in the relationship because of that. But essentially, it's just like she wants to feel you now, and she has found that moment to, to like pick up on and show you that this is the thing that, like, to be here more so that she can feel you more, right? She wants to feel your fullness.
Yeah.
And
gosh, I love
if her
this.
right, if her critique collapses you into like defensiveness or retreat or fuck this, like she's kind of proved herself right.
What do you think he would need from her? Like, let's say he does collapse. What is she?
Yeah.
What does he need from her in that moment?
Well, it depends on what his collapse looks like, probably, right?
Yeah.
If it's like a fuck you collapse, like he goes into anger, then cooling, right? Like cooling energy to help bring him back to his heart, right? So like stroking his body down, if that's possible, right? Like, and feminine is, they're magicians, right? So it's a little bit of energy, she could shift him even if he's in it.
I love that. That's beautiful.
So really, it really depends, and that's where so here's another piece. It's like on the feminine side, are you critiquing him, or it's like, why are you critiquing him? So can you find the part of you that yeah, you could critique him, but critique him for love, right? Critique him as a call for consciousness, not as a way to prove that you can do it all, or that like you really should be doing it all by yourself, right? Or that he really is not good enough for you, or like some way to kind of take him down a peg to prove that you know, are this, that, or the other thing, right? So to find, why am I doing this?
I
And
love that. I've never heard that. That's a really beautiful reflection. Yeah.
it changes it.
Yeah.
Like, because although the masculine's not as sensitive to the energy, he deep down he will feel an underlying motive, especially if he's a little bit farther along. He'll feel like, you know, is this an attack or is this a call for love?
Mm,
And the response will be different. His response will be different
yeah.
depending on which one it is.
I think a bit related to this, I'm curious about this because I think some people also take this polarity work into meaning that the feminine can just emote and express and bring all her stuff. And I've
Totally.
honestly, most of the work that I do is about bringing these boundaries of when it's vomiting and when
Right.
it is an artful expression. But
Mm.
I'm curious, as a man, like what are kind of the boundaries? Because I know a lot of men that are listening to this, they're like, okay, I noticed that certain things I don't think are cool and certain things I do think are cool, but often they need a bit of a list almost. Like, what are the things
Right.
that are beautiful feminine expression that you may or not be able to handle? That's okay. And what are things
Right.
that are boundaries?
Well, I think when there's things like when instead of it being, instead of her emotions being a an expression of her feeling and instead become an attack on uh the other person, on like on his character,
Right. Right.
there's a,
Yeah.
that is a big, like that's the line. It's like it's one thing for her to be angry at the fact that he wasn't present at dinner, and so she's, you know, she allows that through, she's fucking angry,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that can be a really beautiful call to wake him up.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly valid, I would say.
Yeah.
But when that anger gets translated into her belittling his character, or like
Yeah.
emasculating him, or like finding ways to kind of um, manipulate or control, or like just degrade in some way, which can happen in really subtle ways.
Yeah.
Um, but that's a line. Like that's where it becomes, okay, this is not, you know, this is no longer a beautiful gift and a call for love. This is like it's abused.
Yeah.
It's emotion. Like the feminine wields emotion really skillfully, and so it can often, from a man's perspective, it can feel like, whoa, I can't handle any of this. So it does require a kind of warrior's presence to be like, that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like, and it's an important conversation to have in this world, because
Yeah.
it is, you know, it is so easy to translate things like David's teachings to go, oh, the feminine is just anything, it can be whatever, right? um, and in a certain sense that's true, but I also think there needs to be a, like, there are stages for a reason, and that second stage is there so that people are mutually respected.
Yeah.
And if that mutual respect is not there on a moment to moment basis, like, something needs to change, repair needs to happen, connection needs to come back before you can be in a third stage moment.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so important. And just for anybody listening, really turbo quick David data lesson here. But the first stage I always call the madmen, where the guy's working and the
Uh-huh.
girl or the woman is just like is dolled up and cooking him dinner and it's just stuck there. There might be sexual energy, but things are the roles are pretty stuck. The second stage
Right.
is all about nonviolent communication, knowing how to speak to each
Mhm.
other, very relationships based on equality, which is super important stage. And this third stage is very much about your relationship being this vehicle to come to God, and every expression is a devotion to love, and there is this masculine feminine energy exchange, but it's not stuck to a gender. It's much more this fluid dance. And so
Yeah.
this is what Alan is talking about. That second stage is super important, You need to be able to talk about like, hey, some childhood stuff got triggered and
Right.
I kind of lost it there. I apologize. And, and how did that make you feel?
Right.
What do you need from me? And these stages are so important. So I love what you said
Yeah.
here of, I think John Wyland talks about like bringing the anger wide versus directing
Right.
it at somebody. And to me,
Yeah.
that's been one of the most, like, that's clicked in my body so badly because I can feel it. I can feel when I'm emoting in a way that is like a spear, or when I'm
Right.
emoting in a way that is kind of going into the room, and I'm more
Yeah.
showing it to him rather than attacking him with it. And when I'm doing that,
Yes.
I've noticed Tamara just drop into his body and become really calm and still and be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer to do that in
Yeah.
certain ways. Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer for his body to um, receive your anger if it's not,
Yeah.
a spear directed at his heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. I always say,
And it
like,
wakes him up.
if it's a spear, he couldn't even come to me if he wanted to.
Right.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
the water's
Totally.
going in one direction. He can't swim against that. Yeah.
And there is also something to be said for the just because there's a spear doesn't mean you have to fucking walk right into it.
Right.
You can
Doesn't have
push
to
it
be
to the
yours.
side and
Yeah.
pull her closer,
Oof.
right? Like you can learn to, you don't have to just fucking walk into the storm. You can kind of use your own magic, right? And martial arts is a great way for men to kind of start to feel this in their body. Like when, for example, I practiced Aikido for a long time, and when your opponent would put pressure at you, like put forward force at you, you don't just walk into it. You very like skillfully and without a lot of effort, just move it to the side and let their force kind of move them. You're unmoved. You're just flowing with it. And in that sense, like when your partner's anger comes at you, you don't have to, like, in a way, a lot of men we have like a kind of self-sacrifice quality to it. Like, and I think it's actually connected to that part of us that thinks we're bad and so we deserve it,
Mm. Mm.
right? So we'll put that spear right into our heart, kind of as a proof of our pain, of like our badness. And if we can remain in this sort of centered, grounded place, we can just like really gently put that spear to the side. And that's where opening her comes in, right? When she takes the spear and you just plant it right in your heart, you can't open her. You're fucking impaled. You're gonna be right there with her in that charge. But if you can have the presence of mind and the groundedness to move it to the side and bring her closer and like let her body feel your body and like relax past the anger into what's actually true, which is probably just her wanting to feel loved.
Yeah.
And to feel your presence and your care. Well, that's also possible. She doesn't have to like make it this perfectly wrapped gift for you to do it, right? Just to speak to the man's perspective a little bit. So there is obviously this nuance, like, is this something that you need to put a boundary up and say like, this is not okay? Or to have a wider conversation around the dynamics of your relationship? For sure. You get support on that kind of thing, for sure. But just because her expression is intense isn't always an excuse to like say game over, right? Or to throw up a boundary. Like there's, with skillfulness, there's still a way to open her beyond her emotion. And that's a gift that the masculine can give the feminine. Like,
I notice I'm moved a little bit by this imagery of, I could just like, Demer's done it a few times, but I can imagine women listening to this must feel really, just the idea that we could throw a spear at somebody and that person could just be like, hey baby, I'm gonna hold you now.
Yeah, exactly.
That feels like deeply moving into my system and really touching and really loving. But also what you were so beautifully speaking about, this like self-sacrifice in the masculine core of just yeah, kind of this self-loathing, and okay, I'll just walk into it then. Like that feeling, that dynamic almost. It's I notice I'm really moved by both sides of that. And and I'll bring in another piece, which I realize I'm probably not going to talk about very artfully, but I've
Yeah.
had several times in a fight with Demer that I said, don't touch me, leave me alone.
Right.
And the
Right.
thing he did was slowly grab me closer, pull me into his body, and really
Right.
breathe belly to belly.
Yeah.
And I know this is really a tricky thing to bring up, but that
Totally.
was actually what I needed,
Right.
because I needed exactly this. I needed to feel loved, and I needed to feel his body,
Yeah. Yeah.
and just the like really like this belly to belly breathing.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at it
Yeah.
in the nervous system perspective, it's like
Yeah.
you're in a fight state.
Mm-hmm.
Don't touch me. Don't come near me. Right.
Yeah.
But you're in a loving relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know that, but I'm gonna say that you are.
It's a
If
yeah,
you,
pretty much.
yeah, if you are in a loving relationship, I mean, I hope you are. If you're in that relationship, like, you, if you're not, that you shouldn't be in it, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. But so if you're in a loving relationship, it's a gift to bring our partner back to um, safety, essentially, like grounded and relaxed, safe nervous system.
Yeah.
And when they're in fight, if you have the capacity to remain uncharged in your nervous system, then it's a gift that you can give them to bring them there too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Because I saw one of your posts. You were writing about when she closes, when there's a
Mm-hmm.
closure in your system. And I think you described kind of exactly this, of just seeing it happen, not going into the story, and just pulling her body close to yours. And I also felt moved there, because it's like, actually, we think we want to go into the story, and actually it's really that simple. It's almost like, I
It
really
really
see
is.
you, and I'm just going to
Yeah.
hold you now. Yeah.
Yeah.
This
The
generosity
story.
almost.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's coming back to like um, being deeper than her story in a way.
Yeah.
Because the moment you get wrapped up in this, sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
again, it's like there's nuances when you're in this, let's say, the second stage, which, by the
Mm-hmm.
way, I'm never thinking about. I'm never like in a moment, I'm like, oh, this is a second
No.
stage moment. I should be doing this. This is the third stage moment. Time to be artful, right? It's like it's it's you're feeling the moment deeply enough to be sensitive to what's next, right? And it could be to engage in the story and to talk about like how that felt, and what it would be like to change that. How can we talk about our communication in a different way? Like that could be important, or it could be important to like open her beyond her story, or
Yeah.
to deepen him beyond his stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that that's the third stage. That's like taking what we could spend 2 hours processing, and instead artfully using our body and our heart and our sort of energetic capacity
Yeah.
to dissolve it in a second. 'Cause that's really what it is. Our story is just this like charge in our system. And if we can learn to dissolve that in ourselves and in each other, well, we can move through things pretty quickly and not kind of spiral into story, into processing,
Yeah.
into all of that.
I was going to ask you about like how do you as a man sit with, for instance, when she closes, or and not make it mean something about yourself. And then I realized I think this is what I actually mean when I talk about masculine inner leadership. It's not about always knowing what to do and
Totally.
taking the lead and knowing what to do next, but it's actually knowing what to do with yourself. And
Yeah,
that feels really good. That like, oh, she's closing. Hey, this is triggering something in me.
totally.
I have a choice to not go into that drama with myself right now. and to hold her.
Right. And that's what I was saying earlier about like my as I deepened in my practice and my being able to be held by other men, I learned how to hold
Mm,
myself in a better way. I learned the nuances of it, right? So that in
mm,
that moment that she closes, I've learned to hold it enough to be like, oh, I could feel, and for me, it feels like my heart will close, right, or collapse. And I'm sensitive to the moments that are happening before that,
mhm.
where I could hook on to some thought form that,
Yeah.
oh, it's my fault, or I did this thing wrong, or that means this about this. Could
Yeah.
totally do that. Um, but I've also done that enough to recognize that, like, oh, it doesn't actually create what I want always. It doesn't create love and connection in certain times.
Yeah.
So can I learn to hold that in myself and then um, remain sensitive to her? So it's kind of like, you know, the state. Another way to think about the stage is the first stage is all about me. The second stage is all about we, and the third stage is about art.
I like that.
And so if she's sharing and you know, or she does something that feels like closure, and then I latch onto that, that's just me being self-centered and making her closure about me, which I do all the time,
Hmm.
all
We
the
all do.
fucking time, right? um but so the practice is to like not um continuously do that moment after moment after moment after moment. It's like you could feel the possibility of that happening and then have the capacity, the artfulness to do something different, to choose something different, to instead feel the we. Like, can you feel her, what's happening in her heart that she might not even be aware of? um, and then like trust that you can, through your depth and your connection to her and your love, open her to what's actually true, which you don't really need to know. Like it
Yeah, I
it
agree.
doesn't have to make sense, right?
Yeah.
it, it's just coming back to that place of like deep loving openness.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll out myself here again. I'll make little fights with Dermer about, I don't know, something stupid like chargers disappearing. And
Yeah.
I notice I will bring that up and I will truly believe that that's what I'm angry and frustrated about.
Right. Right.
And then when we actually drop deeper, it's something that I can't even put to words, but I will felt that we were kind of disconnecting from each other, or there were some
Totally.
places where
Right.
we weren't feeling each other. And so what I'm trying to say with this is I think often with actually the feminine closures, we don't even really know what it's about, to be really honest. We think we know what
Right.
it's about, but
Totally.
often it's actually, I've
Right.
just been sensing in the space that things aren't completely
Right.
attuned to each other or not completely connected. And that gets me worked up. And then my mind
Right.
will be like, oh, damn, you took my charger
You'll
again.
find a reason. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so let's say a part of masculine leadership would be to sense that disconnection and to
Yeah.
steward connection again before she has to pick the little fight to bring you back to
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. Yeah. I wrote one of your quotes down. It said, the masculine is most attractive when it needs nothing.
Mm,
And I feel that. I will just as a very quick side note, I think the whole practice of non-ejaculation is exactly this, because he doesn't need to ejaculate. And
totally.
that actually makes a man
Yeah.
way more attractive to women. Women will feel that right away. But
Hmm.
let's say you're hearing this as a man, you think, yeah, but I do need.
Right. Totally.
Great, but
Right. Right. So yeah, I got a lot of men who said exactly that
yeah.
from that post. And they're right. There are parts of them that absolutely need
Yeah.
1,000%. They're
Yeah.
not wrong. It's just that there are other parts of them that don't need,
Hmm.
meaning other parts of their being that are complete.
Mm.
And you might call that their deep masculine, like the part of their masculine energy that is beneath need,
Mm.
that like doesn't need. I mean, think about a yogi in the mountains in a cave. It's like kind of the epitome of masculine practice. How much do they need? How much, right?
Yeah.
Because they're connecting with that part of them that is deeper than need. And it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier. It's like the part of us that is perfectly okay no matter what. That's another way to think about it.
Yeah.
Part of us that like can hold ourselves and our experience and our expression and be okay no matter how it's received, no matter what she does. Like there's a deep level of like a deep trust, a deep connection to that part of us that is perfectly okay.
Yeah.
And that allows us to be free in our expression of our needs or of our desires or of our wants or of our sexuality, because we're not tied to how it's received so much. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a lot of men will hinder their expression. And again, this is for a certain level of men. I think this is so important to express because
Yeah.
there are countless men who are absolutely insensitive to how their needs and their desires are expressed or received. And they don't care at all. That's the first stage man who like has
Yes.
no sensitivity to how his needs and his actions are received in it by the outside world.
Yeah.
And those men have created suffering for themselves and for women and other men, you know, a million times over. Like
Yeah.
that's not who we're talking about. Like those men don't have a level of sensitivity or care or heart to connect to what we're talking about in this moment.
Yeah.
And so that's really important to distinguish. Like we're talking about a man who is sensitive to his impact, like wants to be a good, loving, caring man, and probably is in a relationship with somebody that loves him and that he loves, right? And so in those kinds of dynamics, it can be really easy to fall into need or like to rely on our partner to fulfill things for us. And that's not bad. Like we're in a partnership because we can't do it all by ourselves, right? So it's like it's inherent that we're we're not alone. We need something from our partner, like, and it could be to deepen us, it could be to create more love, whatever it is. But in his most sexy moment, like a man won't need his partner for anything because he's
Yeah.
connected to that part of himself that doesn't need, that like is deeper than it. So he could ejaculate, he could not ejaculate. He could he could cry or he could laugh. She could be like in ecstasy or she could be in tears, and it's possible for him to feel the part of himself that is deeper than all of it, that like doesn't need for it to be any different.
I love this. I think anybody with a connection to masculine energy will feel that that part exists. It's just like part of you that just is, that
Yeah,
is kind of just meditating on the
yeah,
side and is
exactly.
okay. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
anybody has spent time in meditation, they've touched that part of themselves
Yeah.
that goes like, fuck, I could sit here for eternity
Yeah.
and not need anything. I don't
Yeah.
need more money. I don't need more sex. I don't need more,
Yeah.
you know, fancy stuff. It's like, and meditation is access to our masculine, right? It's a practice to get there.
Yeah. And I love that you're calling it a part of, because I think this is really crucial. Of instead of thinking, oh, but I need things so I can never access that, to actually see that there's parts of you. There's a part of you that, of course, needs things and has your shit come up and wants to play that out. Of course, that's a part of you. And sometimes that needs time and space to be processed.
Totally.
That's totally normal. That's the human experience. And there's a part of you that you could choose to make connection to sometimes
Yeah.
and I feel that part of me right now that doesn't need anything. I cannot stand in front of her with that.
I might even, I know I said a part of you, but we might even reframe it to like a moment of you, because a part of you, it like kind of assumes that you're this, this thing that has fragments and parts and like, and to an extent that might be true, like family systems and such, that like there's validity in that, but it's also just a moment. And that's why I think the stages are such an interesting sort of framework, because a third stage moment is just a moment. So that like an expression of that, like a deep place of non-need, is just a moment. In the next moment, you might be incredibly hungry. You need to eat a fucking sandwich, and like you need something, right?
Yeah.
So it's just like a moment to moment thing. And what we start to realize is like, oh, when I this moment leads to this kind of experience. Like me expressing myself in this moment leads to this kind of experience. I'm starting to recognize the nuances that happen, right?
Yeah.
When I disconnect from my partner because I need a sandwich, like what does that do to her?
When you're hangry.
What does that do to me? Right? Yeah, totally. Which I can attest to doing often.
Yeah. You have this beautiful quote saying, becoming deeply responsible for stewarding your own growth as a man in a relationship allows her to relax into being your partner and stop being your parent.
Yeah.
Oh, I felt that one so badly. You want to share a little bit about what you meant there?
Yeah. So I think, again, I'm always speaking from my experience. So I was in a relationship with a woman who was much farther along in her life. She was older than me, in her business, and spending more time in her personal growth because she was alive for longer. So we're like, let's say in her spirituality and her spiritual growth. And what the dynamic started to become that she could feel into those parts of me that hadn't yet matured. She was right. And in the times where I let, habit and comfort get the better of me, I wouldn't take responsibility for my maturation, right? For my growth. And she could feel it. And so she would start to feel like, like life wants more life to happen and grow, like life wants growth to happen. So she would start to become responsible for this growth. And there's definitely something to be said for how she could do that. Again, there's always two sides. But if I'm taking responsibility for myself, it's like I wasn't taking responsibility for my growth in certain places. So she had to be the one to do that, right? To like be the parent that helped something grow.
Right.
And that doesn't create polarity, right? That creates dynamics that we probably all felt at different times, none of which are very sexy.
The way I work with this with Tamara, or I've spoken about this multiple times on this podcast, but one of my core boundaries or values in relationships has been that I need my partner to have an ecosystem outside of me, especially an emotional ecosystem. So other men, other people, but also professional support, whatever, because I don't want to be the parent or the teacher or the coach.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And especially when you do this work, like I'll sometimes say like, okay, do you want to coach Sophie? Okay. And then and now coach Sophie's off again.
Right, it's gone. Yeah.
We're very intentional about when that happens, and it doesn't happen very often because I need him somehow to have that outside of me, because when that falls onto me, I also will take the role of parent, teacher, coach, and I don't want to anymore. And so I love what you said when men, I think, take responsibility and start owning, like, okay, what is my practice in relationship? What do I want to work on?
Right.
What do I want to develop further? That inner leadership again is such a different dynamic than, oh, I'll wait for her to tell me that I need to work on this thing.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that's where men's groups can become so crucial for the men, because it's incredibly hard to do on your own, to do this kind of, like, to see yourself accurately on your own is incredibly hard to do.
Yeah.
And most of us are in relationships, so we rely on our partner to do that thing. And especially in the kind of world that we're in, that you and I are in, women have, well, and also just culturally, like, women have been kind of at this a bit longer, right? They've been in their groups, they've been doing their, I mean, like, look at the personal growth industry. It's made up far more of women than it is of men, and there might be other reasons than just they're advanced in my nature, but that does, I mean, I would say that most men who come to the work often do it because their partner is like, something needs to change, you need to do this thing. That's never a great way to enter into it. They need to want it for themselves, but, like, that's the dynamic. And so, like, that's such a beautiful reflection for you and your standards for yourself, is like that your partner have this ecosystem that supports and helps him to live, to grow, right? So that he's bringing that life back to you instead of relying on you for that life, for that growth. Because now your cups are full. Now you're not, there is no sort of power dynamic where one knows, but like the coach, teacher, parent knows better than this, like, the student child, right? So it becomes, from men's perspective, it's incredibly important to take that on, like, become responsible for your growth, so that she doesn't have to do it for you.
And I think it's really this. I think when masculine chorus men bring the energy of intentionality, it's so yummy, because I can feel in my partner so well where he's intentional and directional about his life, and all those places are places where I can soften.
Right.
Like, oh, he's thinking about his physical health. And it doesn't mean that I have to agree with what he's doing, not at all.
Right.
But just to feel the intentionality and the directionality of him. That makes my whole system just relax. And my partner's going into this, he's working with a spiritual teacher, which is absolutely not my cup of tea, these teachings, which is totally okay, but I could feel his directionality in that, and his purpose is him choosing for, this is what I care about, this is what I'm going to do now. And it makes my whole body soft. And I think what a lot of women will feel is often like, oh, he doesn't have that directionality. And I'm curious I think you and I had a conversation about this a little bit, but how do you bring into a man that you would, to your partner, that you would, like, why doesn't he join a men's group or whatever? Like, how do you bring that in a way, or should you even bring that?
Yeah, it can be delicate for sure, because, like I said, it doesn't work when, like, men need to have the right motives. They need to have their own intentionality, their own, like, they're taking responsibility for themselves. And that might happen because their partner's like, hey, check this thing out, right? It might wake something up in them to go like, fuck, yes, I want that, right? So it's not one size fits all. It's not black and white. Like, there are nuances to it. But when a man is being intentional with his time and space and his energy, the feminine partner can trust that he's doing that for both of them as well, right? Like, if you can sense your partner's taking care of his physical health, well, that's a direction that you can trust that he's going to take care of, like, the health between the two of you, right? Like, that he's going to have that same like momentum, energy, depth, direction for you as well. And if you don't see him expressing that, like, how can you trust that he's going to have that, like, have your best interests in mind, have your relationship's best interests in mind, if he doesn't have it for himself?
Mm.
So
Mm.
if he doesn't have that, again, you can't just like berate him with all the things he should be doing. That's just you being a parent,
Yeah.
right? So I think the question becomes like, what am I doing in this relationship? Like, what's the, it's tricky again, like it's kind of nuanced in a way, but if you can't trust him to take care of himself, then where can you trust him? Like, where can you um,
Yeah.
trust in his direction? And if there are places, then like trust those things, support those things. But if you find you can't trust him in any direction, like there's nothing that you can surrender into, then you might need to like question what you're doing in the relationship, because there might be a part of you that is just acting out of shadow, that like wants to be in control, wants to have someone to tell what to do, wants to be the one who knows better, who like
Yeah.
has all the answers, who wants to be the teacher, coach, parent.
Yeah.
And that might wake you up to something.
Yeah. Can I tell you how I brought it to Tamara
yeah,
once?
sure,
So
yeah,
I wanted Tamara to join a certain men's group, and I was thinking about a long time about how I was going to say that to him and how I was going to do that in a way that he wanted to hear it. And what I did is I brought my heart into it, first of all,
yeah,
because when my heart isn't in it and I go with my mind, we become two dudes and
yeah.
we're
You
just
say two
competing.
cubes?
No, two dudes. We become two dudes that
Two
are like,
dudes.
okay, I'm not listening, man.
Cubes.
It becomes
Cubes, basically the same.
basically the same thing. It's not a warm energy. So I brought my heart
Yeah,
in, and then I just said in my vulnerability, like, hey, I noticed I'd love for you to join a men's group, or but instead of saying you should, I said, I'm really curious what you think about this. I
yeah,
would love to hear your opinion. I want to know what you think about it. And
yeah,
that kind of brought me back into a more feminine role and him more in a masculine role, and then trusting him with what he brought back to me. So
right.
when he came back to me and said, this isn't the right thing for me right now, I also made an agreement with myself to trust him in that.
That's
And
great. Yeah,
and that was a very different exchange with me going, you're not in a men's group, you should be in a men's group. I need you to be
right.
in a men's group. Because anybody that hears that is going to think, okay, never mind, I don't want to anymore.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, nobody likes to be shitted on, especially
No.
from their partner.
Yeah. So the question of what do you think about this? What's your opinion
Yeah,
about this? That
yeah,
is already such an opening into leadership and
right.
inviting discernment. Yeah.
That's, yeah. I mean, you have a great answer to your question. It's like to do it in a way that artfully supports his own leadership,
Yeah.
and then surrender to that outcome. Like, if you are committed to loving this being and being in this relationship with them,
Yeah.
like, surrender to their leadership, which might be to say no,
Yeah.
which might be to say this is not for me.
Yeah. 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 Completely. I love that. I love that because I think a lot of relationships will get stuck in the he's not living his life the way I think he should. And in
Right.
that battle, instead of saying, hey, maybe this just isn't something that suits me.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that kind of honesty might actually be the thing that wakes him up.
Yeah. I've seen that many times. Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that many times. Allan, what a beautiful conversation today. I feel like we could talk for another few hours. I want to be mindful of your time. Yeah. What do you love about the feminine?
Mm, what's not to love?
I get it.
um, it makes life worth living. Like, it brings color to my life. I mean, to be in a deep relationship with a woman hormones, just like that aspect of the feminine, um, awakens so much in my being, right? It allows me to know who I am in a much deeper way than I could just on my own. Um, allows me to see my shadows and my blind spots, and like it's just
Mm.
such a gift to be alive and be in the body and have this experience that we get to have when we come together with another. Um, so yeah, just the reminder that it's good, like it's good to be alive. It's what kind of what makes it worth it in a way.
Yeah, I love that answer. For any woman listening to this thinking she's too much or she should tone herself down, like, hear these words. It's literally what makes life worth
Yeah.
living. Yeah.
And even, I mean, I'll say this one last thing. I had a moment yesterday with my current partner who, like, we had such a deep experience, and it was this moment of like we 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 could have been so close. And in her feminine, she instead went to something totally different, which was like questioning and doubting it. And there was this moment where I just started cracking up, and she was like, "What? Like, what is so funny?" And she said, "Like, it's just so funny what the feminine does. It's like it's never a straight line, right? Which is what a part of the masculine just wants to just like, okay, it's done. Like we can just let it be, and then it's perfect, and then like next thing. Um, but how boring is that
Yeah.
in certain ways? And so to feel just the beautiful drama that we get to have as humans.
Yeah. I love this. I love that. I think a lot of people will recognize the moment that a man just smiles and goes, "Oh my gosh, okay."
Yeah.
This direction. Okay, good.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you, Alan. If people want to learn more about you, find you, where should they go?
Yeah, Instagram is great. You can find me at
Yeah.
Allan McGrath Isbell. My website, allanmcgrathisbell.com.
Yeah.
Um, got my embodied relationship dojo
Oh,
for
yeah.
which is a co-ed group, which is really fun,
Oh,
really juicy. Um, yeah, all that can be found through my website and Instagram.
amazing. I highly recommend checking him out because he writes so beautifully. Oh my God, so beautifully. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Alan, for being
Sophie.
here today. I so appreciate your time.
Yeah, I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. Thank you for having me.